Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode in season 2 of Everything BITSAT from a Bitsian. Today, let's take a look at what we are doing wrong when it comes to our learning process and how we analyze our mock tests and how we try to learn new facts, new things. So, let's just dive straight into it as I have a lot to say. So, who's this for? Who should watch this video? If you have been struggling with struggling to remember formulae, or if you have been struggling to memorize things, for example, in chemistry, maybe. If you are not seeing score improvements in your score in your mock tests, then probably your method of analyzing mock tests might not be the correct one. If you have ever wondered that should you study for one long session versus a few short ones, so what does science have to say on that? The most important one is that if you are guilty of expecting miracles, what I mean by that is doing the same thing over and over again but expecting different outcomes. For example, suppose you are learning facts about S block in chemistry, and you have read the chapter 4 times and still you struggle when you see questions from that topic. So then maybe reading it a fifth time in the same way that you have already been doing might not do much. And we never think in the direction that maybe we are learning wrong itself. We just keep thinking that if I do it one more time, it will happen, but it will not. And similarly, if you have used a particular method to remember stuff from P block, and you have struggled with P block in all the subsequent tests, but you still apply the same methods to D block, and then again it's kind of a recipe for failure in D block as well if you do not change your methods. So just cramming it and using the same method which is already failing is not a good idea, and it will not lead to different outcomes. So we have to actually ask ourselves, are we learning in the right way? So with this, I would like to request you to stay till the end of the video, because I will try to apply everything. So what I have done is I have read a lot of online material. I have gone through one book, and I have summarized everything, the most important concepts, simplified them, and tried to apply them to specifically exam preparations for like BITSAT, JEE, and all these things. So please stay till the end so that you have an idea that how to apply this and how to not apply this, because there is that as well. So when we talk about memory, basically memory functions can be broken into two, which is a storing part and a retrieval part. So we will look one by one as to how to optimize each of these functions, how to optimize storing and how to optimize retrieving this information. So let's talk about storing first. I would just ask you to take a few seconds and look at this list that I have put up on the screen, which is shirt, knife, butter, wool, speaker, orange, car, crowd, banana, house. So I would like you to memorize this, and please don't get disheartened. I will tell you how to apply these methods to specifically or subject material as well. But just to give you a general sense of the picture, I am using this example. So once again, shirt, knife, butter, wool, speaker, orange, car, crowd, banana, house. So do not write this down. Do not just try to memorize it, and I will just give you a few seconds to do so. And you can pause the video for 5-6 seconds if you want, and then let's go on. Let's move. So moving on to the next slide. I will come back to the list after some time. So there are two types of memory. When it comes to storing information, what we need to know is there are two types of memory. One is a short-term memory, which is a working memory, and your long-term memory. So whenever we try to memorize something, the goal is to take something from the short-term memory and bring it to the long-term memory. Things come into the short-term memory while you are reading them, and anything which you are doing in the present moment is what your short-term memory contains, but your objective is to bring it to the long-term memory. Now research shows that the most effective ways to get things from short-term memory to long-term memory involves three things. or at least one of three things. One is the difficulty of reaching that value. Suppose there was some very lengthy calculation that you did, and after that you came to an answer. So because it was a very difficult thing, your mind is more likely to have store that answer value in your mind, um, just so that it is not as much of a struggle for you every time. So if you struggle with something for a long time, and if it was a challenging process to get to some answer and you get that, then it stays in your mind for longer. For an example, that is why people say that if you derive a formula, then you are more likely to remember it for a longer period of time, because you have struggled with it. So your mind is likely to retain it for future purposes. Second is repetition. If you see something over and over and over again, no surprise, you are more likely to retain that information. The third one is shock value. So if you think about your own memories, you are more likely to remember incidents from your childhood or even your early teenage years if they had some ridiculousness to them or some shock value to them, when you were like very afraid or very excited. Some kind of that emotion and ridiculousness is something which can enhance your memories going from short term to long term. So how do we use all this in our lives? So now I would ask you to recall how many of the 10 things can you recall. Take a minute and try to list how much could you recall, and then I'll ask you, how did you try to learn it. So I think I speak for the most of us when I say that most of you would have just tried to tried to perform a rote rehearsal in their head, which is like, okay, knife, banana, orange, knife, banana, orange, and that thing is probably the worst way to memorize anything, and that this is the reason why most of us are not able to retain information for long periods of time, because we are guilty of doing this. But the problem with this approach is it is not difficult enough for us. It's not taxing your mind. You are just repeating a particular sentence. So it's not very easy to for that information to go from short term memory to long term memory. That's why you keep forgetting it. So what you need is to have a little bit more effortful approaches so that you can get it inside your head. I also mentioned that repetition is also an approach to do this, but again, that repetition is not the only thing. You need some sort of effort for your brain to recognize that, okay, I see this information again and again, and again I'm kind of requiring some effort. So why don't I just memorize the final result so that I can use it later for easier and faster retrieval. So then some of you, if you had remembered more than I would say 7 items, then probably you would have grouped them in some way or tried to find some patterns. For example, wool and shirt, they are like fabric materials, clothes. Butter and knife, you use a butter knife for buttering your bread, or orange and banana were fruits, and things like that. If you have done some grouping, so then again you're trying to find some patterns, you are kind of struggling with the data points a bit. So that is why you are more likely to store it for a little bit longer and store a little bit more of the content than if you were just doing rote rehearsal. Another good thing, which I am sure is not possible within this amount of time, but it's a good approach, is preparing to teach someone. So if you have a friend who you can teach a topic to, or if you don't have anyone for that preparation, even using a rubber duck or any kind of toy, and trying to explain to it from your memory or anything, that helps you in finding weak spots in your memory and even in your understanding of concepts, actually, to in a very natural way. So you will explain step by step without even looking, and you'll get stuck. So you will know that, okay, this is the part where I'm lacking. This rubber duck, where this idea comes from, actually in the software industry, there's an approach called rubber duck debugging. which means that suppose you are stuck on a program, you are not able to figure out why it is not working. What people do is that they don't want to disturb other people working with their own parts of the software. So what you do is you get a rubber duck and you try to explain your problem to the rubber duck step by step, line by line. And it has been seen that it's a very effective way of finding problems in your own code, in your own way of problem solving. So this is actually a standard approach used in the industry, which you can also use in your preparations. Then acronyms, everyone is familiar with these kinds of things where we make acronyms for periodic table, for this is a very common one from childhood. My very educated mother just showed us 9 planets for the basically the planets in order. So this approach also works. Again, you are being creative with it, so there is some aspect of ridiculousness, there is some aspect of effort. So that is why this works. We all know that this works, but we don't sometimes always use it to the maximum potential. That is why I'm trying to stress on it, that we should actually use this approach more often. And the best possible approach, in my opinion, is the approach of imagery, because it has both the requirements of being an effortful thing, as well as having shock value, because you can make it as ridiculous as you want. So you can have a story like this, which I have. This is my I made it like this is an original creation. So suppose you try to imagine this in your head. You close your eyes and you imagine like this, that a thief grabs you by the shirt, knife to your throat, and asks you for all the butter that you have in your house. He's completely dressed in woolen clothes. You shout on a speaker for help. Afraid, he gets into his bright orange car, but a crowd has already gathered by that time. One of them threw a banana peel and the car slipped and the thief was caught. And then all went back to their houses. So if you see at the bottom, I have copy pasted the initial list. And if you look at this story and you imagine it once in your head, you are more likely to remember it for a very long time. Now, what you will say is this does not seem practical. This seems very time consuming. So yes, I'm not saying that you should use this for everything. I'm just saying that you should use it for anything you are struggling with. And like once if you try to observe your own work, the working of your own memory, after some time, after a few mock tests, after a few study sessions, you will be able to figure out that, okay, these are my weak areas. These are the areas where I struggle with frequently. So in those areas, not just using some simple like rote rehearsal things, we can go for these elaborate approaches. Also, you will get faster with practice. Once you start creating these stories, it will take a while, maybe 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 1 week. But after that, you will get used to it. You will be making scenarios in your head. You will be linking words, joining them. You will start seeing patterns more clearly. So you will get faster with practice. Also, in the long run, this will help you in saving time. Initially, yes, you are spending more time, but all your revisions will be faster, and you will have to revise fewer times, because the story which I showed you, you don't have to recollect again and again. You can just skim through it once and you will remember everything. So it's not like you will have to read the chapter 4 times, 5 times. You can just memorize this one story, and you should be able to revise much quicker, and it will actually save you time in the long run, and it will give you better results. Again, it allows for like more creativity and fun, so it's less boring, in my opinion. You are not just sitting and learning the properties of some element, like, yeah, this is hard, this is brittle, this is this that. So you are allowing yourself to have a little bit more fun. So I think again that gives you an additional motivation to study, so which is also very welcome. And then you might say that, how do I apply it to my syllabus? So this is just a random example I came up with, but for example, if you're trying to learn the properties of silicon, so you can just imagine in your head that you are walking along Silicon Valley and you found a shiny coin, and when you picked it up, it was brittle, so it crumbled. So this is like the properties of silicon. Some keywords like silicon is shiny, it has lustrous properties, it is brittle. So which means it's not malleable or ductile. So all these things, you can just pick up keywords and arrange them into stories, and you can continue it. You can be creative with it. So while yes, it takes time initially at the onset, but you'll get faster with practice, and this will actually give you better returns and save you time in the long run. Another technique is simply spacing. So what happens is, this is the addressing the question whether you should have one long session versus many small sessions. So what people generally think is if I have 5 hours of study to do and I have 5 hours in a day, I should just do it in one shot. But that is not actually good. It is better to break it up into 5 1-hour sessions spread over different days. This is because if you are studying for continuous 5 hours, then what will happen is, if I try to break down the subject material into 5 parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. So if you are studying all the 5 parts in succession, while you are on part 2, the memory of part 1 is so fresh that you are not actually struggling to remember part 1 as much, and you are just going through part 2 and then part 3, part 4, because everything is so fresh. There is little to no effort involved in the recalling. But if you do it over many days, so if you do part 1 today and you go to do part 2 tomorrow, then while you're studying for part 2, you will struggle a little bit to remember part 1. So one thing is that you will find your blind spots in part 1, that okay, I'm forgetting this, I should relook this up. But also the little bit of extra struggle that you're doing in recollecting the the previous parts, that would actually enhance your memory, enhance your storing process to a large extent. So that is what I mean, that you should space your sessions. And again, you might say that I don't have, I have to study more than 1 hour a day. If I have 5 hours to complete, I don't have 5 days. So maybe you can intersperse different subjects that will have the same effect of breaking that continuity and that ease of recall. So if you have, suppose, 5 hours of chemistry and 5 hours of math, you can interchange them with interleave them. So you do one part chemistry today, one part math today, then you can do one part math tomorrow, one part chemistry tomorrow, and so on. You can figure out how to break that discontinuity, how to break that continuity. So what your challenge is to not study in continuous sessions, so that recalling the previous parts is harder. That's the gist of it. Now let's come to retrieval parts of it. The storing part we have done. So coming to the retrieval aspect of it. So one thing we should know is that retrieval is of two types, mainly two types. One is recall, which we have already tried to do when I asked you to name all the elements that were there in the list. The other one is recognition. So recognition is like, I'm giving you some information regarding what you were supposed to remember. So I'm asking you, were orange and banana on that list? So this is a much easier question rather than recalling the entire list without any kind of clue, without any kind of directive. Now I'm asking you very specifically, were orange and banana on that list? And you will be very likely to say yes, they definitely were. And it was a much easier process inside your head. You did not have to think too much about it. So this is why subjective type questions are generally perceived to be harder than objective type questions in exams, because subjective type questions are kind of making you to recall things, whereas objective type questions have a more recognition kind of process, that you are seeing the options and you have to just select which one is correct. Why I am telling you this is that there is a big mistake that people do when they are evaluating their mock tests. Suppose you did a test and you are looking at the solutions. So what is your approach while you look at solutions? Do you actually look at the solution, think actively about it, whether why this approach was taken, why some other approach was not taken? If you took some other approach, what would have been the failure? If you took this approach, why did it succeed? All these things, do you think, or do you just check, do you see the solution and see that if each step follows mathematically from the previous one, and you are just seeing that, okay, this is the first line of the solution, second line of the solution, okay, from first line to the second line, the transition makes sense, from second line to third line, the transition makes sense. If you are doing that, then what you are actually doing is training yourself to verify a given solution. you're not training yourself to come up with a solution. So that is the problem, that you are working on a simpler problem, much like recognition, while you should be working on a harder problem. You should be training on a harder problem of recall. So when it comes to doing questions, it's always better to see the solution, solve them once again, kind of like a recall exercise, that you're doing it from your mind once again, not just reading it, and not just checking step by step. Okay, this happens, okay, this means this is equal to this, okay, yes, this follows, I transpose this, I do that. And if you are doing that, again, as I said, you are training yourself to do the wrong thing. You're training yourself to do something on which you will not be evaluated in the exam. You will be evaluated in the exam to come up with a solution, not to verify a solution. Yes, I agree, both of them require some sort of theory knowledge, that you should be aware of the subject material to be able to judge whether a solution is correct. But again, that's not the problem that you are being judged on in the exam. So you should prepare yourself to come up with a solution, and not just verify the correctness of a solution. So if you are not able to do a question, see the solution and try to solve it again after some time, to again give a kind of gap in between, so that the recollection is harder for you to do. Another thing, this kind of relates to my previous video, where I suggested that we should study in similar environments as we would be in exams, or we should not use music while we are studying. That is because a lot of our memory is actually context or state dependent, which means that state means like what were you doing when you made that memory. Context means that what was going around you when you made that memory. What were you feeling? So if you are studying in the right environment, in the right posture, if you are sitting in a desk and chair, then you are more likely to recall that information when you are actually in the exam in a similar setting, sitting on a desk and chair and writing an exam. If you are listening to music while you are making these kinds of memories, then it is very possible that you won't be able to actually recall them as effectively in the exam when you don't have that musical context around you. So that is one of the reasons that why I suggest that you should try to simulate exam settings as much as possible when you are writing mock tests, and when you are studying and making these new memories. Apart from that, one very effective thing that you can do is create artificial cues. So yes, not everything is in your control, but you can control very small things. For example, I had created an artificial cue in my preparation, that right before sitting for preparation, I used to keep my wristwatch on my table. So every time it created kind of a signal in my head that when I'm studying, I kept my wristwatch at the table. When I was in the exams, always I used to do this thing, that I used to take off my wristwatch and keep it on the similar place on the table, so that it's kind of a signal on my head that yes, this is the context of me studying and me memorizing things. So yes, I think that did help me a bit. It helped me in focusing. Every time I took off that wristwatch, first it was my signal to be more alert and involve my mind and focus, and as well as it helped me retain more, it helped me recall more. So there is a small imperceptible kind of enhancement that you can get by creating your own artificial cues. The conclusion, to conclude this, basically, I would like to say that yes, this might seem too much effort, it might seem uncomfortable, it might seem unfamiliar, but I would like to say that at this point you have two options. One, if you are struggling currently, then you have two options. That one, you can stay with your current methods, and as I've already suggested, and as you would have already seen in your own life, is that if you are staying with the current methods, there's no guarantee that anything will improve if you read that chapter the fifth or sixth time, or if you use the same approaches in a different chapter. So either you can stay with your current methods and have no improvement, or you can try some new methods and experiment a little bit and see at least some improvement. I can assure you that you will see some improvement if you try to use these methods. So yes, they are uncomfortable, but I think that's the only way to go if you want to see some improvement. Expecting miracles is not the way to go. So again, to conclude, do not repeat the same things as you were doing previously and expect different outcomes. To these new approaches, you need to give them time, you need to practice, and you need to keep at them for them to be effective. And also, you don't need to use them everywhere. You should not overthink too much on making a particular story in a particular way, and just go by your preferences. Have fun while you are at it, because this JE preparation, BITSAT preparation, all tends to get a little bit monotonous. So this can be a way to get a little bit of more joy into the process. So that's all I have to say for this video. Thank you. I hope this helps you, and do let me know if there is any particular favorite method of yours, if you're already using these methods. So I hope you found something new. I hope this helps you in increasing your score in subsequent mock tests, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.